Hi everyone, my name is Rob Nagle. I am here to talk to you today about the Scottish play. Though I heard Sir Ian McKellen once say, "I've played the role so many times, I can say the title." So let's just get it out and all over with. Macbeth. We're going to talk about Macbeth today. And hopefully something that I have to offer you will get you a little insight into it and also make you excited about it. Why Macbeth, you might ask? Why the Scottish play? I love this one. I always have. I believe it was the first Shakespeare play I ever saw when I was about 10 years old, and I was transported. It was a college production with a couple of equity guest artists playing the leads of Mac and Lady Mac. And I remember to this day, I can see the sleepwalking scene. I can see Outdam's Spot. And I remember being amazed by the horror of the play, the bloodshed of the play, and the complicated natures of its two leads. Then about 5 years later, I saw a production of Hamlet. And the young actor playing Hamlet at the time was named Don Riley. And I remember he fooled me as I was watching this. I'd started to read Shakespeare and not understand any of it because I was, a pre-teenager and a young teenager. So I didn't know what most of the words meant. I didn't have a dictionary handy that I realized that's my best friend here. And I remember watching this production of Hamlet, and Don tricked me into To Be or Not to Be. I didn't even know that it had begun. He just said it with such ease and so swiftly. He crawled up the back platform, sort of like overlooking a house or a scaffolding, I don't know what it was, part of the castle. And he crawled up the back and he said, "To be or not to be? That is the question." And you were in the monologue, you were in the soliloquy before you had a chance to think, here it comes, here's the big one of the most famous series of lines ever written in the English language. And I always held on to those two memories. The Macbeth that transported me and the surprise of finding myself in a famous speech in Macbeth. We'll come back to that later. And it haunted me as a play. It's one of his shortest. That's not why it haunted me. But I've been in 1, 2, 3. I've been in 3 productions of it. Or is it 4? I've directed 1 production of it. So, of the Shakespeare plays, I know this play better than any of the others. At least I feel like I know it. I can almost mouth the words, when you get used to watching something again and again, and you're actually following along as you go, and waiting for the surprises that are still in the play to be uncovered by actors like you. So, Macbeth, where do we begin? Well, one of the things that bothered me most when I was first sitting down with one of the directors I worked with on the production of this play, I'd found lacking in productions were that the leads, Mac and Lady Mac, the two who are dearest partners in greatness to each other. And what a revolutionary thought that is, to be dearest partners in greatness in 11th century Scotland. The equality of the relationship has always moved me. But I've often found them played as evildoers. And I don't find that so interesting as finding a complicated reason to tell the story. For example, he's a hero, a soldier hero. He's just been in 2 places 45 miles apart, so the story goes, defeating the Norwegian forces that are trying to invade Scotland, Norwegian forces. And he's also managed to push off the insurrection from within Scotland, executing the Fanes who were traitors. And he's saved the day and saved the country. So how do you take a hero like that and turn him into a villain? You can't do it quickly. It has to be a slow slide, I think. And oftentimes you see Lady Mac portrayed as a witch or portrayed as an evil woman. I know that Walt Disney used the evil queen in Snow White and modeled that partly on Lady Macbeth. He wanted her to look like that. And, people who begin a play evil are really hard to follow unless you're watching Iago or Don John or Aaron the Moor. You can't really follow villains all the way through when they're your lead. Richard III, arguable, but we sort of enjoy ourselves watching him take over and revolt and murder. But how do you do that with a noble hero like Macbeth? A thane who's pledged allegiance to his king. And a wife who wants the best for him. Well, you have to play it as a complicated character. One of the directors I worked with once, when we were well into the process of rehearsal, said, "Hey, so you're doing great. You're coming along. It's making a lot of sense, but there's one thing that's missing." I said, "Okay, what is that?" And he said, "Well, what would you do to be the greatest actor who ever walked the boards, who ever trod the stage, to be the greatest actor the world had ever seen?" And I started thinking about that and thinking, wow, what would that be like? What would I do to get there? And he said, "Would you kill your parents?" And I was so shocked by the question that no, I wouldn't. And he said, "There it is, right there." So what are you talking about? What? No. Like, you thought about it before you said no. And that denial needs to live in Mac the entire play, as long as you can keep it going, until everything's spun out of control, until blood will have blood, until it's over for him because he can't turn back. He's waded in too far to the bloody water. I am steeped in blood so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er. Until he's too far gone, he's got to keep denying it. And look at it. 3 weird sisters. Not witches. They're depicted as witches. That also drives me crazy. They're not witches. They're weird sisters. And weird from the Anglo-Saxon word weird is not strange and crazy and freaky, right? It's not a hot mess. Weird means someone who can see the future. So someone who sees destiny or sees where you're going. So 3 weird sisters tell Macbeth and Banquo, "Hey, you're going to be a thane of Cawdor. Hey, you're going to be a king of Scotland. And by the way, Banquo, your children will be kings." And then, like clockwork, the news arrives that Macbeth has now been named Thane of Cawdor. If you were told 3 things that were going to happen to you, what would you do? That's destiny. That's fate. That's coming, right? No matter what you do. Then the next thing that happens, he sees Duncan, the king. Duncan thanks him for saving Scotland and defeating the Norwegian lords, right? And the Norwegian king. Norway's been pushed back. And he says, "Hey, here's my son. He's going to be Prince of Cumberland. He's the next in line." Well, that doesn't jive with what the Weird Sisters had predicted. Okay, well, I guess that wasn't real. I guess it's not going to happen for me. I guess I won't be king. And then Duncan says, "You know what? Instead of going to my castle, let's go to your castle. We're going to go to your castle. Whoa, we're going to stay and party at my house? Yeah, we're not going home. Okay, well, let me send word ahead so my lady, my wife, can prepare, because the king and all of his lords, all of his thanes are coming to my house." And they say, "Wait a minute, how is this? What does this mean?" And of course, when that news arrives to Lady Mac, she realizes this is the nearest way. Duncan's coming there tonight. I guess this is how it happens. Not that I want to kill a king, but that, look, we've been told by these soothsayers, by these three women who know what's ahead, that we are going to be King and Queen of Scotland. Who are we to stand in the way? I guess the gods are telling us what to do. And you have to remember, at this time, if something was said to you, it was ordained. Something was said to you by a seer, a soothsayer, by someone who sees the future. It wasn't just, oh, that's an interesting tarot card reading. That was what was to happen. So I'd always been had complicated thoughts about when things fall apart for these two. And I think that the moment that Duncan is murdered is when things start to slip away from Lady Macbeth. And the moment when Duncan is murdered, things also start to slip away from the Lord Macbeth. And never the two meet again. The unraveling begins, which will eventually end, spoiler alert, in madness that leads to suicide. Or maybe it's just suicide. Some bad dreams, for sure. They'll sleep no more. That's what it ends up for her. And for him, it ends up with forgetting the taste of fear. There was a time when my senses would have shocked. The hair would have stood up on the back of my arms. But now, I have no fear. And in that moment, like clockwork, a messenger comes in to tell Macbeth that his wife, the queen, my lord, is dead. So letting their downfall happen slowly has always been important to me, so that I can be on their side for as long as possible. And then at the last minute think, no, don't, oh, there they go again. No, don't, not your friend Banquo. There we go again. No, don't, not Macduff and his entire family, all his pretty chickens. Not that. Not his chickens. His chickens were probably fine, but his children were all killed. And then you see young Seaton slaughtered. You see soldiers attacking the castle after the Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane. You see Macbeth's unraveling. And by the end, it's only when Macduff faces him and says, I was untimely ripped from my mother's womb. I was not of woman born. I'm the one who will kill you. That Macbeth says, fine. I will not yield to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet. Bring it on. So the complication of how do you play two apparently evil characters? They're not evil characters. We're all capable of this. Never say never. Circumstances can push you. Maybe not three weird sisters, but circumstances can push you to do things you vowed you would never do. That's one complication. And the other one was just in reference to a single line that I never thought made a lot of sense. It's when Mac is saying, no, we will proceed no further in this business. He hath honored me of late, and I've brought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which should be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. We're not going to kill the king. We're having a party. We're celebrating the triumph of Scotland over Norway. We're not doing this. And she says, was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Your hope of the king, your hope of a future, were you just drunk? And does it sleep now? She says in the end of this scene, near the end, before he finally turns and says, okay, we'll do this. I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums. I never played her. And dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. She'd take her baby while nursing and crack its skull open on the stone floor of the castle. If that baby betrayed her, swore to her, and then went back on the oath. Now, historically, Lady Mac was married to someone else before Mac, according to Holinshed's writings. The real king, Mac, who was not so much of an evildoer as he is in the play, he ruled Scotland for about 14 years. People seemed pretty happy with him. But yes, he killed King Duncan, and King Duncan's father 5 years after, and reputedly killed Lady Macbeth's first husband, and 50 of his men. They might have been burned in a fire, like set on fire. They were tough times. 11th century Scotland, right? Well, she says, I've given suck, which historically means that she had a child or children by her first husband. I don't find that very interesting or very compelling as an argument. So my revisionist history brain says Mac and Lady Mac had a child that died. And from the searing grief of that loss comes, some decisions that aren't as well thought out as they might be. And that child that died was a male. His gums, his boneless gums, toothless gums. So the child that would have been the new king after Macbeth becomes king is dead. And the wife would have killed the child herself had he so sworn as you have done to this. So I think there's something in the death of a child. There's something in a couple that can't have children. He has no children, Macbeth says. There are signposts throughout the play that point me toward thinking, how do you make this personal and not just about two people trying to take the kingship, trying to commit regicide and become king and queen? There are few clues in there, and I always feel like they need to talk about the children that do not exist or are not on stage, so that it can be even more devastating for Macduff to lose them when they're all murdered. Anyway, lighthearted stuff, right? Those are just a few thoughts that I wanted to throw at you to begin our discussion, our conversation. I know you're not, you talk back to me, but I can't hear you right now, but we can always talk about it some other time. That's just a few of the things that I wanted to start with regard to Macbeth. And here's my copy, which I had to replace because my previous two were so noted up and well worn, it was annoying me. And I thought, I need a new, fresh one, so that when I approach this again, I don't have any preconceptions about it that I wrote from my younger years, whether it was a year ago or 25. So here we go with Macbeth. So I thought it might be interesting to examine all the times that Mac talks to the audience, theoretically alone. Sometimes he's on stage with an aside while Banquo and the Weird Sisters are hanging out, and other times he's alone on stage. Other times he's talking when maybe there's a messenger nearby. But after the Weird Sisters, or the Wayward Sisters, I've sometimes heard it say as well, though I think that's a judgment, so I'm just going to stay with weird, the ones who see the future. After they say, hey, just so you know, you're going to be a king, but first you're going to be a Thane of Cawdor. But the Thane of Cawdor lives. Yeah, I know. We know. We've talked about this. So the first witch says, all hail, Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. He's already Thane of Glamis. That was his father, Sinel, or Sinel. Sinel I like better. Sinel's death, he's Thane of Glamis. All hail Macbeth, the second witch says, hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor. No, the Thane of Cawdor lives. He just betrayed the country, we think, with the Norwegian lord, Norwegian king. And then the third witch says, all hail Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter. So he says to them, what are you talking about? Because Banquo says, good sir, why do you start? Obviously, he's thrown by this. He's not excited by it. That's strange, horrifying news. None of it's possible. Hail, 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 they say. And he asks to know more. They don't really tell him more, but they tell Banquo that he'll be father to a line of kings. Whoa. Thou shalt get kings, though thou be none. So all hail Macbeth and Banquo. Banquo and Macbeth, all hail. He wants to know more, and he asks for more. He charges them to speak, and they disappear, vanish into thin air. What seemed corporal melted as breath into the wind. You can use that visual, can't you? You know, in cold air, when your breath melts and blows away. Anyway, Ross and Angus show up. They give the news that he's now Thane of Cawdor. The Thane of Cawdor has been executed for his treasonous crimes. And when he's not even alone, Angus and Ross and Banquo are talking. And the witches have disappeared. The wayward sisters have disappeared. And Macbeth says, Glamis and Thane of Cawdor. So Glamis I am, and Thane of Cawdor. The greatest is behind, meaning the king, the crown. He thanks them for their pains, and then goes back to Banquo and talks to him for a second about, hey, do you hear what was going on? Do you not think your children shall be kings when those that promised the Thane of Cawdor to me promised no less to them? Gave the Thane of Cawdor to me, promised no less to them. And he goes to talk to, Banquo goes to talk to Ross and Angus again, and Macbeth goes back to an aside. Two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act of the imperial theme. Thank you, gentlemen. So we've got two truths now. Glamis and Cawdor, now that I've been named Cawdor. Two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act of the imperial theme, meaning king. This supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. There's already a contradiction. If ill, why hath it given me earnest of success, commencing in a truth? I am Thane of Cawdor. So if it's a bad thing, why did it give me a successful thing like become Thane of Cawdor? If good, why do I yield to that suggestion whose horrid image, the murder of a king, doth unfix my hair and make my seated heart knock at my ribs against the use of nature, having trouble breathing? Panic attack, or fighting one. Present fears are less than horrible imaginings. Like what I'm going through right now is nothing next to what I could imagine comes next. My thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical, it's not even considerable, it's fantastical, shakes so my single state of man that function is smothered in surmise, and nothing is but what is not. He's completely wrapped up in this thought and not comfortable with it, because he can feel his hairs standing up on end, his heart's beating fast, he's having trouble having natural responses, like maybe breathing. Banquo notices how wrapped he is and in his own world, and Macbeth says, if chance will have me king, why, chance may crown me without my stir. Meaning, I'll get out of the way. I don't have to do anything. If chance is going to do it, chance is going to do it regardless of what I do. Already not planning to commit regicide. And then he says, come what come may. Come what come may. Time and the hour runs through the roughest day. Like, let's just let it go. Just come what come may. Even the roughest day, time keeps going, and eventually the sun goes down. And then he's pulled back in. Worthy Macbeth, we stay upon your leisure. And they have to go and find the king now. So you already have a sense that he doesn't want to go there. It's a fantasy in his head. A beautiful fantasy. But the horrible imaginings that go on with how he might become king, noticing how kings become kings. And if you want to know about that, look at Richard II. He's got a beautiful soliloquy about how kings become kings. He's already on his way toward, okay, we're not going to do this. No, we won't do this. Now, in the very next scene, he's with Duncan and all the fellow Thanes, and they are, he's rejoicing. In fact, King Duncan is crying. His eyes are wet with tears when he thinks about what Macbeth has done for him. O worthiest cousin, the sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me. Thou art so far before that swiftest wing of recompense is slow to overtake thee. I begun to plant thee, and will labor to make thee full of growing. And then he thanks Banquo as well. And he says, my plenteous joys, wanton in fullness, seek to hide themselves in drops of sorrow. So I'm so happy that I'm crying, or about to. And then he names his son Malcolm, his oldest son Malcolm, the Prince of Cumberland, the next in line for the throne. Which at the time in Scotland wasn't necessarily how it went. Thanes would sometimes gather and choose the next one. And after you save Scotland from Norway as a hero, war hero, you might think in the back of your mind, wow, maybe I'll be king because I saved the day. And that would be great. Then Duncan will give me the crown when he passes, and I'll become King of Scotland, and then the Weird Sisters will have been right. But instead of doing that, Duncan gives the crown next in line upon his death to Malcolm. And says, we're going to go to your house, go to your castle, from hence to Inverness, and bind us further to you, says King Duncan. And Macbeth has another moment aside. He says, the Prince of Cumberland, that is a step on which I must fall down, or else o'erleap, for in my way it lies. The contradiction of that thought, step on which I must fall down, or else o'erleap, for in my way it lies. He doesn't know how it's going to happen, but he does say, stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. The eye wink at the hand. Yet let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see. Now what's that line, the eye wink at the hand, mean? Yeah, the eye wink at the hand. That's probably one of those moments where you thought, as you're listening, I don't know what just happened. What just happened? Well, stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires. You got that part, right? The eye wink at the hand, meaning the eye not look at what the hand's doing. The eye wink at the hand. Close your eyes and don't see what your hands are doing. Yet let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see. Meaning let it be, come what come may. Just get out of the way. Let what is to be, and stop trying to let your black and deep desires make you think about what you should do next. Goes right back to the denial that director was telling me about that day in rehearsal. You had to think about killing your parents to be the greatest actor to walk the stage for a moment before you could deny it and say, no, that's not in me, that's not in me. And what a more interesting journey that is than to be bloodthirsty as soon as you hear the Weird Sisters say you're going to be king. Complicate it. Don't play some Grand Guignol version. That's just my take. We're not really interested in that. At least I'm not interested in that. If you're bloodthirsty for murder, I have a harder time getting behind you for a longer time in a 5-act play if I've already given up on you. So that's why I think you need to complicate it. Now, he gets home. He's reunited with Lady Macbeth. She's probably been a little worried because she only gets messages through, she doesn't get a text. She doesn't get an email. She gets letters coming from galloping horsemen to tell her that her husband is alive, dead, or that he's going to be king. It's a different kind of letter that she gets this day. And the next time that Mac is alone, it's after Duncan has arrived. Alone and talking to the audience. It's after Duncan has arrived, after they've been partying and celebrating. And then he leaves the chamber, leaves Lady Mac there, which she comes and scolds him about shortly, but right before she does, and says exactly what I was talking about before, about I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. That's about to come up. But right before it happens, Mac walks on stage on his own, and there's the stage directions are hot boys and torches, and enter a sewer, not a sewer that you're thinking of, and diverse servants with dishes and service, and pass over the stage. That's a taste tester, someone who makes sure that food isn't poisoned, right? And then he's alone in his castle, in his home, and he says, "If it were done, when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly." Meaning, can this just get over with? And guessing again, or hypothesizing again, if the assassination, first use of that word, could trammel up the consequence, meaning could gather it up, the consequences of the assassination, and catch with his surcease, with his death, success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here. It's like an interrupted thought. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. So if the actual act could take the consequence away, we jump anything of what comes in between now and king. We jump anything that comes between now and death. We wouldn't get caught. We wouldn't have consequences. We'd just have success. But in these cases, we still have judgment here. He should still have judgment. He can't be ready to kill the king. That we but teach bloody instructions, meaning we think about them, and we clarify them, which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. So you throw these thoughts out, and then they plague you by coming up with them. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. There's madness in this cycle, in this circle of bad thought coming back to you. He's here in double trust. First, as I'm his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. Then, as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Meaning, Duncan's here, trusting me in two different ways. First, as he's my king, and second, as he's my guest. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, he's been so good at his job, that his virtues will plead like angels trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. His virtues will plead against him being killed, like angels, and pity like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, the first one. Is that the Big Bang? Or is it the blast from the trumpet? It's up to you. And pity like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, meaning the winds, right? Shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. They will grieve over his death. And then his conclusion of this, I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. And then, like clockwork, Lady Macbeth comes in and he says, how now, what news? He's still fighting it. And he's about to say, we will proceed no further in this business. He hath honoured me of late, and I have bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which should be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. And then Lady Macbeth says, what is wrong with you? I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. One of the reasons I always love the art in Shakespeare is that you often have options in your footnotes, because sometimes the page has, text and then footnote, footnote, footnote. It's a lot of academic reading, but sometimes it's useful in figuring out how you might want to play it. And for a line like, I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other, here are some options. I have no spur to stimulate my guilty intention, except ambition. Ambition, which is like a too eager rider who is vaulting into the saddle and or leaps himself and falls on the other side of the horse. So if you like horses, that's how you should take that one. Another explanation. Lights on the opposite side of what was intended. That is, dishonor and wretchedness instead of glory and felicity. And then there's another one. The idea of vaulting into a saddle was a much admired feat. But one other academic, and by the way, don't listen to a lot of academics because they don't have to act. You're the one who has to act it. Take the good that you like from what they give you and throw away the rest. Unless they were hiring you and could fire you and recast you. Then, pick your battles. But this other one says, Shakespeare may be thinking of a too furious rider who, leaping too high at an obstacle, clears it indeed, but falls on the other side. That sounds a lot like the beginning one, doesn't it? Someone else wanted to insert, a guy named Cunningham wanted to insert side after other. Falls on the other side. But the entrance of Lady Macbeth interrupts the soliloquy and fills in the gap. I can't agree with Wilson that Macbeth is exhausted by his passion and that therefore Shakespeare makes him end with an unfinished sentence, a weary gesture applying the gap. The images from horsemanship, spur, and vaulting were suggested by Horst and couriers above. I really don't care what you think because you don't have to act this. We do. So then you close the book and choose what feels good in you. In all things. Follow your instinct, because your strength is in your choice, not mine, and not theirs, but yours. Now, the next time Mac is alone on stage, it's after he sends Banquo and Fleance away, and then he sends away a servant, and this is the moment before he goes in to commit the deed. To do the deed that he later says, I have done the deed. So he tells the servant to go bid thy mistress when my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell, get thee to bed. And the bell will indicate that all's clear, go do it. And then what happens? This guy couldn't catch a break. A dagger appears before him, floating in the air. He hallucinates this. So he gets 3 weird sisters telling him the future. Then a dagger floats in the air in front of him. And he says, probably a little freaked out, I would be, is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. And he tries, I have thee not, but I see thee still. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. And then he talks to the dagger. Art thou not fatal vision? Fatal, interesting use of the word. It's both fatal as in lethal, as well as fatal as in this is your fate. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat oppressed brain? Fever dream, fever dream. I think he tries to make it go away then. And he opens up his eyes, and it's still there, haunting him. I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. And he pulls his own out. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going, meaning you're telling me where to go. And such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses. Everything else tells me this isn't real, but my eyes are telling me that it is. My eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. He closes again, I think. Opens them again. He's still there. I see thee still, and on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. And maybe the dagger disappears. Maybe he just turns away from it. He holds on to his own, the real one, as opposed to the imagined one, or the hallucinated one. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. And then he takes in where and what time it is. Late at night, right? Now o'er the one half world, the half that's in darkness as opposed to the half that's in day. Now o'er the one half world, nature seems dead. Nighttime. and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings, Hecate the queen of the witches, and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howls his watch, thus with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides, towards his design, moves like a ghost. Meaning like the wolf when he's hunting, stealthy pace. The predator. And then he talks to the earth. He says, "Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps, which way they walk, for fear the very stones prate of my whereabout." Meaning, if you make noise, they'll know where I am. They'll hear me. They'll wake up from their curtained sleep. And take the present horror from the time, which now suits with it. It's understandable why it's horror. Whiles I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds, too cold breath gives. Cold breath, I'm assuming we mean Duncan's cold breath. Death. The bell rings. That means his drink is ready. It means Duncan is ready. The daggers are laid inside, and the chamberlains are drunk, as Lady Mac filled them up with liquor. I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven, or to hell. Already a contrast in where Duncan's going to go. He doesn't know which, but he doesn't want him to wake up. Then I think, how do you keep someone from making noise when you're killing them? That's when you get to imagine how horrible what he has to do is. As far as I'm concerned, you cover the mouth. You make him unable to speak. And cut the throat. Or scream. And then you do the deed. And you come back out in a panic because you hear things. You hear voices. Things happen back there. He hears a voice. Macbeth shall sleep no more. From this night forward, he shall sleep no more. And you know what happens when you don't get enough sleep? You start thinking even worse than when you were in searing grief over the loss of your child. And now the unraveling begins. For both of them. And the blood is there, and the blood will have blood. The next time he has a brief moment alone with the audience is after Lady Macbeth takes the daggers because she sees that he's brought them from the place and they have to lie there. So she says, infirm of purpose, meaning you're sick with a purpose, you're ill. Give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt. So she's going to go in there and find whatever blood she can and smear it all over the chamberlains, the waiting servants, the guards perhaps. She's going to smear the blood all over them and leave the daggers there. And he's alone now, Mac. She disappears, and there's a knocking within. No one was supposed to be knocking. That means someone's there. That means they're going to get in trouble. He says, whence is that knocking? How is it with me when every noise appalls me? Please note that later in the play, nothing will fear him. Nothing will strike him with fear. How is it with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ha! They pluck out mine eyes. I wink at the hand. I want to pull my eyes out after what I've done. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? He asks, and answers, no, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. Now you could argue making the green one, the green sea, red, or you could argue making the green one red color, meaning the whole ocean will be blood. Great images to act, right? Great dreams to have to be haunted by. And then Lady Mac comes back in. My hands are of your color, but I shame to wear a heart so white. And she hears the knocking and begins to panic. And now they've got to go get cleaned up. Because the knocking's happening. They've got to get washed, throw the clothes away, get the blood off their hands, and pretend they were sleeping very, very quickly. They've got a little bit of time while the porter says some funny things about drinking and urine. And then Macbeth will enter with Lennox. And within a few minutes after that, they discover the body and ring the alarm bell, and then Mac and Lady Mac have to come in and ask, what's the hideous trumpet? What's the business that such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of the house? Speak, speak. Right before Malcolm and Donalbain, his brother, flee. Because everyone's looking at them. He's the next in line. Obviously, he might have had something to do with it. Even though when Lady Mac faints, they say, look to the lady. Yeah, look to the Thane of Cawdor, too. Oh well, no, but then we wouldn't have a play for another 3 acts. Now we're at Act 3, Scene 1. Banquo and Fleance have decided to go for a ride on their horses and get away. Now maybe they're trying to escape. We don't know. It's up to the actor playing Banquo. Maybe they're just trying to get a breath of fresh air. Pick the hot choice and go with that. And then Macbeth is alone after wishing their horses swift and sure of foot and commending them to their backs, meaning go, farewell. Banquo exits, and then he tells everyone there, let every man be master of his time. Let every man be master of his time till 7 at night. To make society the sweeter welcome, we will keep ourselves till supper time alone. Meaning, you too, Lady Mac, everybody leave me alone. And he tells his attendant to go get the men who attend his pleasure. Bring them before him, because they're without the palace gate. They're outside the palace gate. And then he's alone, and he says, to be thus is nothing. He's now king. But to be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. He's not safe. Our fears in Banquo stick deep. And in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared, meaning there's reason to be scared of him. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind he hath a wisdom that doth guide his valor to act in safety. He's safe, I'm not. There's none but he whose being I do fear, and under him my genius is rebuked, as it is said Mark Antony's was by Caesar. He's bringing up that assassination. Okay, he's looking back to ancient Rome for guidance. He chid the sisters, meaning he scolded the sisters, the weird sisters, when first they put the name of king upon me, and bade them speak to him. He bade them speak to him. Then, prophet-like, they hailed him father to a line of kings. Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown, no children, and put a barren scepter in my grip, or gripe, thence to be wrenched with an unlineal hand, no son of mine succeeding, no lineage coming. So guess who's next in line? Banquo's issue. Maybe even Fleance. If it be so, for Banquo's issue, for his progeny, have I defiled my mind. For them, the gracious Duncan, have I murdered, put rancors in the vessel of my peace, in my soul, only for them, and mine eternal jewel given to the common enemy of man, the devil, perhaps, to make them kings, the seed of Banquo kings. I've done all of this for Banquo and his children. Then he chooses, rather than so, come fate, back to fate, into the list, and champion me to the utterance of what? Something you say? The maws of hell? Who's there? The grave? He says, "Who's there?" And the attendant enters with two murderers, and he sends the attendant to the door so they can speak quietly. He convinces them over the course of the next several pages, or lines, I should say. It's not that long. It's a short play. Convinces them to kill Banquo and his son. And then he says, go do it. They say, "We are resolved, my lord." And he says, "I'll call upon you straight, abide within. So I'll come tell you when to go." And his last couplet of that scene, "It is concluded." It is concluded. If that phrase doesn't mean anything to you, look it up in the Bible. It is concluded. Banquo, thy soul's flight, if it find heaven, must find it out tonight. So he knows it's over, and Banquo may get to heaven, though Mac's probably feeling less and less likely that he will. Banquo was always a good guy in this, and part of the reason he's a good guy in this play is that he was James I of England, who had come from Scotland and converted his religion in order to become King of England, was a direct descendant, or in the lineage at least, of Banquo. So Shakespeare might have been nodding to the king and saying, "Yeah, I know your people were good, but this horrible king that I'm depicting here, Macbeth, not such a good guy." But Banquo, boy, things were bad for Banquo. He never should have been killed. Maybe a little, trying to rub the king the right way. And James was also terrified of witches. He had a book published. He wrote it, but I'm sure someone else wrote it. He's the king. Demonology is the closest way to describe it. We talked about witches and how scary they are and what should be done to them. Wasn't very supportive of the Wiccan community, James I. And there are reports that said he was terrified of the play as well, because he saw three witches, not three weird sisters. Poor James. He wasn't as popular as Elizabeth. Now, the next time Mac speaks to us is a full act later. We go from Act 3, Scene 1 to Act 4, Scene 1. The banquet has happened, the celebration, the ghost of Banquo appears and haunts him there, and then he has visions in the scene with the weird sisters. He goes back to the weird sisters to talk to them, and greets them in a lovely way by saying, "How now, you secret black and midnight hags, what is it you do?" And they give him visions of what's to come. Not necessarily things that he wants to see or hear, but that's what they give him. And once they disappear, he asks of Lennox, who's there with him. He calls for him and says, Lennox says, "What's your grace's will?" Says, "Saw you the weird sisters?" "No, my lord." "Came they not by you?" "No, indeed, my lord." "Infected be the air whereon they ride, and damned all those who trust them. Damned all those that trust them. I did hear the galloping of a horse, who was it came by? 'Tis 2 or 3, my lord, that bring you word, Macduff is fled to England." Here's another betrayal. "Fled to England? Aye, my good lord." And then, probably to himself and out of hearing from Lennox, "Time thou anticipatest my dread exploits," meaning he's escaping to England. I was already nervous about him. From the last scene, the banquet scene, I ask at the end, how is it that Macduff doesn't come celebrate with us? Why doesn't he listen to my bidding? He's already doubting him, and then he goes and sees the weird sisters and gets even more concerned about his safety. So he says, "Time thou anticipatest my dread exploits. The flighty purpose never is o'ertook unless the deed go with it. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. And even now, to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done." No more pausing, no more thinking. It's the antithesis of Hamlet. It's action instead of inaction. And he says to Lennox, The castle of Macbeth I will surprise, seize upon Fife, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. Kill his entire family. No boasting like a fool, this deed I'll do before this purpose cool, but no more sights, he says to the witches, he says to the weird sisters, to the wayward sisters. No more hallucinations, no more daggers, no more line of kings with crowns, no more aborted babies, all the visions that he sees with the sisters. There are many, and they are disturbing. No more sights. Where are these gentlemen? Come, bring me where they are. And off we go. Now the rebel forces are mobilizing against the king. His wife, Lady Mac, isn't doing well. He was told by the witches that he'll be safe until the Burnham Wood, moves toward Dunsinane. And wood doesn't move, forests don't move. And until, well, no man of woman born shall ever overpower Macbeth, so that doesn't exist. That's not going to happen. He's safe. He's finally feeling safe. But they are coming to attack the castle. And his servants, lily-livered, scared. They see 10,000 soldiers coming. And Mac sends them away. Says, go prick thy face and overred thy fear, thou lily-livered boy. What soldiers patch? Death of thy soul, those linen cheeks of thine are counselors to fear. What soldiers whey face? He's pale and scared. The English force so please you, take thy face hence. And he sends him away, and then calls to Seaton, or Satan if you prefer. I like Seaton. I don't like to be too on the nose. Seaton! I am sick at heart when I behold. Seaton, I say! This push will cheer me ever, or deceit me now, meaning the English force. I'll either survive it and win and be heralded forever and be cheered forever, or it will cheer me forever, or it will deceit me now and I'll be killed. And he says, I have lived long enough. My way of life is fallen into the sere, the yellow leaf, and that which should accompany old age, as honor, love, obedience, troops of friends I must not look to have, but in their stead curses, not loud but deep, mouth honor, breath, which the poor heart would fain deny and dare not. Seaton! And Seaton arrives. So he's looked at his life and he said, everything's fallen apart. And then his final speech alone. Probably the most famous of all the things he says in the play. That no man born of woman shall e'er have power upon me. But it's not looking good. And there are women crying within the castle. So he enters and says, hang out our banners on the outward walls. This is in Dunsinane within the castle, Act 5, Scene 5. The cry is still they come, our castle's strength will laugh a siege to scorn. Here let them lie, till famine and the ague eat them up. Were they not forced with those that should be ours, we might have met them dareful, beard to beard, and beat them backward home. I mean, we would have had a battle, but let them all die here, in the foreyard on the other side of the moat. Seaton comes in and says, it is the cry of women, my good lord, and exits. And he's alone again, and says, I have almost forgot the taste of fears. The time has been, my senses would have cooled to hear a night shriek, and my fell of hair would at a dismal treatise rouse and stir, as life were in it. I have supped full with horrors, direness familiar to my slaughterous thoughts, cannot once start me. No more fear. It's almost like no more feeling. Wherefore was that cry, he asks as Seaton re-enters. And Seaton says, the queen, my lord, is dead. And all he says in response, she should have died hereafter. meaning she should have died later. She should have died at another time, after this time. There would have been a time for such a word. Now, people usually start this speech with tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. But I like Don Riley doing Hamlet, to surprise people. And it connects in my mind to be able to say something that allows you to finish a thought in the next line. Scansion police be damned. And then play an emotion as opposed to a logical response. So the queen, my lord, is dead. She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word tomorrow. And tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. So that it actually takes you on a journey through his mind and his sense of what time is, from petty pace from day to day, petty pace of time, to the last syllable of recorded time, meaning before the death, right? And all our yesterdays, all those days that passed, have lighted fools the way to dusty death. She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word tomorrow. Tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, brief candle. Is he talking about life? Is he talking about Lady Macbeth? Or both? Life's but a walking shadow. A poor player, self-referential. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, who I think he's cursing God in that moment, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. It's about as existential as Shakespeare gets. What's it all for? Nothing. He's gone now. If that's his belief, he's gone. He might as well find Macduff or find some man who's not born of woman and end it. And a messenger comes in and says, my lord, the forest is moving to the castle. And again, maybe he curses God. So, that's just a little tiptoe into this play from the perspective of the title role. We haven't even gotten to Lady Macbeth, but no one's ever let me play that role, so I'm going to leave that to other people. Thanks for listening.